How many of you think about climate change on a daily basis? Wow, this is impressive. I was not expecting that. I didn't used to, but then I read about the impact it can have in Boston. In the next 10 years, we're expected to have 6 weeks or more of 90-degree days. We're going to have sea levels rise over a foot, and we're going to have about twice the rainfall in each storm, which means that our drainage systems aren't going to be able to keep up. It's pretty depressing, right? Well, let's change gears a little bit. How many of you brushed your teeth or hair this morning? Awesome. How many of you have cool sunglasses like this? Amazing. I see those in the back. These are great, but they're all derived from fossil fuels. So when we think about making products like this, it's a linear system, right? We start with a barrel of oil, we turn it into plastic, eventually it gets trashed and burned, and we emit CO2. So we go from fossil fuel to CO2. Not great, right? Well, what I'd like to pose to you is, what if we can circularize this? What if instead of using fossil fuels as our carbon feedstock, we can instead take CO2 that's been emitted to actually achieve negative emissions? Now we're both removing CO2 from the atmosphere and using it to make products we use in our everyday lives. Effectively, turning emissions into opportunity. And we have a lot of opportunity. It's estimated that we'll have to remove about 6 million tons of carbon dioxide in order to achieve the 1.5 degrees. So we can't just stop emitting, we have to actually remove what we've already emitted. And in fact, what I'm showing here, that ball is 1 ton of CO2. So that times 6 million is what we need every year. How much are we removing now? You cheated, but yeah, he's heard my talk before. Currently, we're not removing any. So we have a long way to go. Why aren't we removing any right now? Well, the way we can think about turning carbon dioxide into a usable feedstock is using these green balls. Those are catalysts, and that's just a fancy word for things that can change the energy of that CO2 and make it into things that we can then upconvert. So these green balls are great. They can interact with an electrode. That's the gray thing on the bottom. The problem is they're really inefficient and very expensive right now. They're so expensive, in fact, that we can't use them. So this is where DNA comes in. Picture the three-dimensional structure of DNA. I'm sure many of you think of DNA as a genetic code or as the library of our cells, right? Our genetic material tells our cells what to do. But what people don't often think about is the three-dimensional structure of DNA and how interesting and unique that is. So if we look at the structure of DNA here, it has a couple of unique properties beyond the sequence that we're going to focus on. The first is it can act like a zipper. So the two strands in the double helix come together through hydrogen bonding. That's reversible. So you can zip DNA and unzip it as many times as you want by changing the temperature. What most people don't think about, though, with DNA is that it can actually act like a wire. So the DNA bases that form the structure, the core of that DNA, can act almost like a stack of pennies and allow electrons to flow through them. And we can use that for sustainability. Because now what we can do is, instead of having those green balls kind of bouncing around and not being super close to our electrode, we can tether them to our surface using DNA. So now we're using a wire to boost the efficiency of our system. And when those catalysts eventually crap out, instead of having to replace our entire system, which is what we have to do in electrolyzers right now, we simply remove one of the strands of DNA and flow in fresh. It's effectively like changing the tires on your car instead of replacing your car every time you get a flat tire. And it's because of this that we reach economics that make this a viable option. The fact that we have that DNA there decreases the amount of energy we need to put in to convert CO2 by about 30%. This decreases our overall cost by about 25%, with 90% efficiency to convert CO2 into chemicals that we can then use. And what this means from a practical standpoint is we can now make carbon monoxide for about $350 a ton. That's compared to $600 to $700 a ton, which is what it costs to do that from fossil fuels. So we are now not asking companies to use technology because it's sustainable. We're asking them to use it because it will boost their profits. And so what I ask of you today is to think about how else we can combine the natural world in unique ways with our built environment to create sustainable solutions. Thank you.